Story 1: The Night of the Deer. It was a cold autumn night when Alex and his friends decided to camp out in the woods near their small town in Utah. The forest had always been their go-to spot for late-night hangouts, but this night was different. The group had been talking about skinwalkers, the legendary creatures of Navajo folklore, known to take on the shape of animals to disguise themselves. What started as light-hearted banter soon turned into an eerie silence as the woods around them seemed to come alive with strange noises. As the group sat around the campfire, they suddenly heard rustling in the bushes. Thinking it was just a deer, they brushed it off until they noticed something peculiar. The deer that emerged from the trees wasn't quite right. Its eyes were too human-like, and it moved with a strange, jerky motion that sent chills down their spines. The deer stood still, staring at them with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. One of Alex's friends, Mike, tried to shoo the deer away by throwing a stick in its direction, but the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it slowly turned its head toward Mike, its neck twisting unnaturally. The group froze in terror as the deer began to change. Its body contorted and lengthened, limbs elongating into a grotesque parody of a human form. The skinwalker now stood before them, half human, half deer, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. Panic set in, and the friends scrambled to their feet, running as fast as they could back to their car. The creature let out a bone-chilling scream that echoed through the forest, a sound that would haunt them for years to come. When they finally reached the safety of the car, they found deep claw marks on the door, as if the skinwalker had been waiting for them. They never returned to those woods, and none of them ever spoke of that night again. But the memory of that human-eyed deer and the terror it instilled in them remained etched in their minds, a reminder of the dark, inexplicable forces that lurk just beyond the edge of the familiar. Story 2: The Shapeshifter in the Desert. Lena had always been fascinated by the stories of the Navajo Nation. As a cultural anthropology student, she jumped at the chance to do fieldwork in the Four Corners region, where she hoped to learn more about the myths and legends of the indigenous people. But one story, in particular, captivated her: the Skinwalker. Locals warned her to steer clear of the topic, but Lena's curiosity got the better of her. One evening, while driving back to her motel after a day of interviews, Lena noticed a coyote trotting alongside her car. At first, she thought nothing of it. Coyotes were common in the area. But then, she realized it was keeping pace with her car, even as she sped up. Unease began to creep over her as the coyote's eyes seemed to glow in the fading light. Suddenly, the coyote darted in front of her car, forcing Lena to slam on the brakes. She swerved off the road, her heart pounding in her chest. When she looked up, the coyote was gone. Relieved, she tried to restart her car, but it wouldn't budge. As she sat there, trying to calm herself, she noticed a figure standing by the side of the road. It was a man, or at least it appeared to be. But something was off. His movements were too fluid, too animalistic. He was tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed just like the coyote's. Lena's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at: a skinwalker, the shapeshifter of legend. The man began to approach her car, a twisted smile on his face. Lena could barely breathe as she fumbled for her phone, but when she looked up again, he was gone. The desert was silent, the only sound her ragged breathing. Gathering her courage, Lena tried the ignition one last time, and to her relief, the car roared to life. She sped away, not daring to look back. When she finally reached her motel, Lena locked herself in her room and stayed awake all night, unable to shake the feeling that something was watching her. The next day, she cut her trip short and left the region, never to return. The experience left her with a deep respect for the stories she had once thought were just myths, and a fear of what might be lurking in the dark, waiting to reveal itself to the unwary. Story 3: The Call of the Crows. Tom had always been skeptical of supernatural stories. Growing up in Arizona, he'd heard all about skinwalkers, but he dismissed them as mere folklore. That was until the night he encountered something that defied all rational explanation. Tom was hiking in the remote desert, far from civilization, when he heard the unmistakable cawing of crows. It struck him as odd, as crows weren't typically active at night. The sound grew louder and more insistent, seeming to come from all directions at once. Unease settled in the pit of his stomach, but he pressed on, determined to reach his campsite before nightfall. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the cawing ceased abruptly, plunging the desert into an eerie silence. Tom stopped in his tracks, listening intently. Suddenly, he heard a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something large moving through the brush. His heart raced as he scanned the darkness, but he saw nothing. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Tom caught a glimpse of movement. A figure stood on a nearby ridge, silhouetted against the twilight sky. At first it looked like a man, but as Tom watched, the figure began to change, morphing into the shape of a large bird. A crow, but far too big to be natural. It spread its wings and let out a deafening screech that sent chills down Tom's spine. He turned and ran, adrenaline fueling his escape. But no matter how fast he ran, the screeching seemed to follow him, growing louder and more frenzied. Just when he thought he couldn't run any further, he stumbled upon a small cave and ducked inside, gasping for breath. The screeching stopped, and for a moment, all was silent. Tom dared to peek outside, only to see the massive crow perched on a rock, staring directly at him with eyes that seemed almost human. The creature let out one final, blood-curdling scream before taking off into the night sky. Tom didn't sleep that night, too terrified to close his eyes. When dawn finally broke, he hiked back to his car as fast as he could, swearing never to return to the desert. The experience left him shaken to his core, a stark reminder that some legends are rooted in truths too terrifying to comprehend. Story 4: The Cursed Oak Tree. In the fall of 2021, Karen decided to remove an old oak tree from her backyard. The tree had been there for as long as she could remember, but its roots were damaging her house's foundation. She hired a local tree removal service, and the workers began the arduous task of cutting down the massive tree. As the workers chopped away at the tree, they uncovered a hollow space within the trunk. Inside, they found a collection of strange, old objects: a rusted dagger, a cracked mirror, and a bundle of yellowed letters tied with twine. Karen felt uneasy but dismissed it as an odd coincidence. That night, Karen was awakened by the sound of branches scraping against her bedroom window. She looked outside and saw the silhouette of the oak tree swaying in the wind, despite being mostly cut down. She brushed it off as a trick of the light and went back to sleep. The following days were filled with bizarre occurrences. Karen heard whispers and footsteps around the house, and her pets refused to go near the area where the tree once stood. She started having vivid nightmares of being trapped in the tree, unable to escape. Desperate for answers, Karen consulted a local historian, who told her about a legend associated with the tree. It was said that the tree was cursed by a witch who had been wronged by the villagers centuries ago. The objects found inside were believed to be items used in dark rituals, and disturbing the tree was said to unleash the witch's wrath. Karen decided to bury the objects in a nearby forest, hoping to appease the spirit. She also planted a new tree in the oak's place as a gesture of goodwill. Gradually, the disturbances ceased, but Karen could never shake the feeling of being watched. She shared her story with friends and neighbors, warning them about the tree's curse. The experience left Karen wary of disturbing nature and more respectful of the old legends and folklore that had been passed down through generations.